Okay, welcome back, everyone, and I hope you feel suitably refreshed after lunch. I have the great pleasure of introducing our next presenter, which is David Silke from Mitel, and David's going to be taking a tour through the now of work and looking at balancing technology, culture, space and pace. So there's a challenge to say that, and I'm sure you'll deliver it in a great way as you usually do, Dave. So over to you.
Thank you, Jonathan. First of all, I would like to say a big thank you to Jonathan and the Britannic team. It's lovely to be back. I'll talk a little bit about the last two times I presented at this summit in a second, but I do recognize, first of all, the fact that it's after lunch or whatever time, maybe you're watching this at a different time, but I will try to keep this relatively lighthearted and energetic and conversational, because certainly over the last year and a half or 18 months, Mitel and the role in life that we fulfill is that we're a communications and collaborations company. We've had, I suppose, the fortunate and unfortunate challenge of working with millions of customers over the last year and a half with partners such as Britannic, and trying to initially keep them at work and then begin to figure out whatever this new reality is that we're all forced to deal with now. So for today's conversation is really about some of the lessons we've learned, the stories we've heard, how it is that all of us are trying to balance technology and culture and space and pace all at the same time. And if you take nothing else away, and I get the fact that we're probably all tired of webinars and summits sitting behind computers and screens, but if you take one thing away from the next 20 minutes or so, is just that balancing act that we all continue to work through. And I don't think anybody has solved the complete magic bullet yet. So we're all continuing to learn, and hopefully some of the stories that I tell may just give you some insights or a different way of thinking about some of the challenges that certainly everybody is facing. So one of the things I mentioned is that I'm fortunate that this is the third year that Jonathan and the crew have invited me to speak at this summit, which I love. I had the opportunity to do it in person in 2019, and looking back at the title of the Mitel presentation at that stage was, I feel like we had a crystal ball, because we knew exactly what was going to happen for the next 2 years, right? Because everybody knew that there was going to be a pandemic that would stop the world, but this was before that was even contemplated. And we spoke a lot about Mitel's understanding of, we were looking at the fourth industrial revolution, the integration, kind of, how it was titled cyber physical, but the integration of the human and technology and what that was likely to do over the next 25 or even projecting 35 years on. And a lot of that was driven by emergence of artificial intelligence and machine intelligence and cloud and virtualization. But little did we know what would happen a mere 3 months later in relation to COVID. And I think one of the greatest learnings was in a lot of cases, the technology, it was always there. It was there to enable remote working and work from home. What wasn't there was the mass use case that would force literally everybody to make that move in a matter of weeks. And that, to say it mildly, caught us all by surprise. In 2020, I was fortunate to be invited back, and we spent just time kind of talking about what Mitel and customers had learned about the first 6 months of dealing with COVID. And bless us, at that stage, we were talking about the future of work, and we didn't know. We were every one of us were trying to figure that out. But what had happened was a lot of the commentary from the previous year had actually come to life and was being used. So you see it every single day, where that explosion in touchless content, contactless. I was in London last week, and it was a non-contact experience, from the car park to getting on the plane, to getting off the plane at London City Airport, to getting in a train and arriving in the office, to the point that, you know, the badge goes on to the elevator at work and you don't touch any button because it takes you to the floor that you need to go to. And that's just, you know, mind-boggling when you look at the explosion in automation over a relatively short period of time. But certainly 2020 was a lot of just trying to understand the needs of people. How do we simply keep companies and enterprises working, and how do we enable that productivity in a very, very quick period of time? So here we are in early November of 2021. I think we all expected that we would have emerged back dealing with life the way that we used to. It's simply not the case. We're dealing with a mixed situation, and it varies by country. And certainly from a Mitel point of view, having listened and learned from numerous people, the obvious things are just a massive increased awareness across the board from people in general, and an increased awareness in the use of technology across all age groups. What used to be, you know, hey, if you were a certain age segment, maybe a little older, never used or interacted with technology, all of a sudden becoming a Zoom expert overnight. All of us that were, you know, in professional environments got thrust into and have been trusted into what we would call, you know, this blended life, where we've just had to deal with working from home and home blending into work and work blending into home all at the same time. And that's forced us all to really ask questions around the valuation of space. And we you know, Mitel, we would stress the word space, because space can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people in relation to the space at work, my own space. How do I define my workspace at home? How do I set boundaries? And the other piece of that was what technology allowed us to do was to define pace. And by that, I mean, it allowed us to think about, I can be productive working from home, probably more so in some instances that I could be in the office. And that allows me to work at a particular pace, but it also allows me to have a pace of life in relation to doing things that I may not necessarily have been able to have done before that, because I was spending hours commuting, or I was spending hours just not being as productive as I could be. And so we're fortunate that technology has allowed us to redefine a pace of life, probably in a way that we would not necessarily have been able to do before. So, you know, we certainly are in a situation now where, you know, it's almost a tad trite to say, you know, welcome to the new normal, because everybody's got a phrase for what it is that we're dealing with today. But what I would stress, and certainly what we come across continuously, is everything is new, and a normal today may be redefined as a different normal tomorrow because of a change in circumstances. And again, a strong piece of advice that we have learned, not that we would give, but we have learned over the last couple of years, is just that importance of remaining agile, and that importance of being flexible in everything that you're contemplating and doing. So you know, Mitel as a company over there, you know, again, mentioned over the last 18 months, we spent a lot of time actively listening to the 3,000 employees that we have across the globe, and the challenges that as individuals or groups that they faced as they try to continue to collaborate, or they try to continue to work, listening to the millions of customers that we serve all over the globe, and the challenges that they face, and also actively listening to the thousands of global partners similar to Britannic that, you know, really manage the customers directly, service their needs, think about the integration and the workflows and all of the challenges that they face. And the other piece of work that we did was we set up what we would call these listening posts with a couple of analyst firms to just probe and answer questions or ask questions around what are you seeing, or what are you hearing? What is the hybrid work environment, and is that a physical thing? Is it a virtual thing? Is it a mixture of things? What are the challenges that creates, and what are the impacts? And are there solutions for those particular impacts? So for the next 10 or so minutes, I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of those listenings and some of those learnings, and then I'll just bridge into a close around the challenge and the overall opportunity that we face. And I think it'll be consistent with a lot of your thoughts. But again, all I'm striving to do is share some of the stories and experiences that we've had. One of the things that has become an absolute has been the importance of listening to employees. There's no doubt about the big quit, the big resignation, whatever it is that you want to define it, in that individuals are making decisions on a daily basis to revalidate and reevaluate where they are at a particular point in time. And that's having a massive impact on enterprises all over the world. Some of the statistics are pretty stunning in relation to, if we just look in August alone, the number of Americans that just quit their job. That wasn't necessarily, in some cases, it was to go to another job. In other cases, it was just, I'm not doing this anymore. There's more value that I want to get out of my life, or frankly, I cannot deal with this virtual interaction, and we've removed most of that physicality, and that's very, very challenging. Globally, I actually think that this statistic is higher, but 2.5% of the entire workforce considering quitting their jobs. Just, I've had enough. I'm done. Minimal engagement scores, and we've seen that in a lot of customers that we've spoken to, as they look at the engagement of their employees, and they're asking Mitel a particular question, which is, how can you help us when it comes to communications and collaboration, and how can you think about doing that in a innovative and different way? How can we make sure that we energize or re-energize a community of workers that we have? And insofar as looking at that physical location for a particular point in time, how do we make sure that the physical workspace is potentially mirrored to the same workplace at home? But that engagement scores across the board have dropped very, very significantly over the last couple of years. Huge numbers of workers looking to relocate. I live in Galway on the west coast of Ireland, and you see it here where, I wouldn't quite call it an exodus, but it's certainly a big movement from the bigger cities to more country locations with access to 5G broadband or very high-speed broadband. That makes that decision easy. It forces companies into really thinking about what it is that employees need to provide to the people that work there. And what does that physical location look like? But overall, just this huge disruption to business operations, and more importantly, a huge disruption to the most fundamental asset that any company has, which are the people. Because without that, what have you? So we've certainly, and I think I'm a great example of this myself, living on the west coast of Ireland, that knew now of what how we've had to reblend our lives as we balance the home life, the work life, our own wellness, into thinking through the priorities of what it is that we as individuals want, and how does that couple and shape into the culture and expectations from a company's point of view. One of the lessons learned, and I'll share this from some research we did with 451, was just a huge initial increase that people felt in productivity working from home at the beginning of COVID, but slowly but surely now an increase in people feeling less productive as they're trying to balance all of the things that they have to do in a domestic situation while having to manage the challenges of work at the same time. So very, very important as you're, for anybody that's in a management role, for anybody that is a member of a team, is just being real empathetic about thinking through the challenges that individuals are facing, and they may not necessarily be visible. It may be something that's happening in the background, and it's just having an overall understanding of what people are facing. One of the external kind of listening posts that Mitel put in place and working with Frost and Sullivan was just beginning to ask a question to thousands and thousands of global companies around the what is the impact of the crisis? What exactly is happening as companies are looking at employees returning to work, and what does it mean? And again, if I left you with one thing, would be, it sounds a bit trite, but the only certainty is that continued uncertainty, is making sure as you're thinking and planning through things is to leave that room for changes that you may not necessarily see. But some of the Frost and Sullivan research kind of, it didn't come back with anything overly earth-shattering, but what it did really was reinforce some of the things that we knew instinctively that were happening in terms of COVID-19 has really removed any stigma whatsoever when it comes to work from home. It's gone. It's been gone for a year. What it has left is this rebalancing of how we expect that to move forward, and an emerging craving now for that physical collaboration, and how it is that companies like Mitel working with Britannic can look at converged solutions to make that a shared experiences, because we certainly expect that offices will lose that allure of being productivity centers. I think gone are the days where you're going to see just hundreds of people filing in to work in their little cubicle. I think it'll become far more around collaboration spaces, about places of engagement. And even some of the conversations that we Mitel are having with real estate companies is thinking through how it is that we can jointly collaborate as we look at collaboration and innovation, the overall experience, the use of light and sound, and the impact of making sure that all of those things are thought through, because that hybrid work environment requires a lot of seamless technology that will work in a physical office location that then gets mirrored into the home location, and that's something that we spend a lot of time just thinking and working through. The other piece of research that we did, again, as a listening outside of just the partners and customers, employees, was with 451 Research, when we really tried to understand the impact of the last 18 to 20 months on the individual, and that impact then in terms of what it meant to companies. And top line is we're still trying to figure that out, as are thousands of companies all over the world. Behaviors are continuously evolving and changing, behaviors of people. It's quite interesting. Again, I shared my own experience. I did 2 trips to the UK last month. The first trip I made, I just found it a completely sensory overload in comparison to the west coast of Ireland, trying to just think about the crowds and tubes and crowds of people. The second time I went there, which was last week, it just wasn't as overpowering. Like, I'd already begun to reach back into that, I suppose, memory vault to become more comfortable in that situation, while still kind of looking out for myself. But behaviors are continuously evolving and changing as we find ourselves in different circumstances. I mentioned earlier on that there's definitely a concern over focus and distractions. Part of this research was quite evident, and it pointed out that there was a major concern about how do I maintain a focus at work? How do I make sure that I can maximize collaboration, whether it is virtual or more physical, so that if I am at home, I'm not distracted by other things and I can focus on what it is that I need to do. Because all of us, companies and people, are really looking at the balance between the increase that technology provides, and the downside of that balance is how encroaching is that technology in our lives, and how do we manage that balance between work and home, because it is about us redefining what we define as our own space to work, and creating a pace of how it is that you're going to do that. And the culture and values are going to become, I think, an increasingly important piece of that. So, it's a major challenge. There's definitely an opportunity, but there is a major challenge when it comes to how it is that we listen to understand not just the virtual piece of hybrid work, but the physical piece of hybrid work as well. And by that I mean is that encroachment into the home by which you're expected to work. That's as much hybrid work as it is spending 2 days in the office, or not having my commute, but being expected to be productive during that time. We need to make sure that we really support the growing desire for that work-life balance that not just people have craved, but have found, and have found through an incredibly stressful but unique set of circumstances. But I refer to that big, the big resignation. That's real. It affects companies everywhere, all over the world. So strong guidance in terms of that challenge around the support of that work-life balance and fostering engagement and culture in a remote work environment. Mitel, we spend a lot of time surveying employees, listening to employees around how they're feeling working at home, how they're feeling about productivity, how they're feeling about going back into the office. What are those parameters in relation to the hours, the days? What is the most effective way to make sure people feel safe in that environment? And also, how do we evolve the business operations to enable collaboration? And that will be one of the striking opportunities that we see in relation to the utilization of workflows, so that experience can be consistent for everybody, both customers and employees. And that's a really major step forward in relation to thinking through the opportunity that we have ahead, because certainly it's an easy thing to say, but we are striving to provide that stability, certainly in a world of uncertainty, striving to provide the technology that continues to allow communication and collaboration, but also striving to provide empathy so that we can understand the challenges that individuals and companies face in what can only be described as a continued unique environment. So we talked about, the landscape from 2019 into 2020, listening to the thousands of employees that we have, the millions of companies that depend on Mitel and companies and partners like Britannic, the challenges that we face based on the learnings over the past 18 or 20 months or so. But there are also opportunities, and opportunities, in a lot of ways defined by that balance between technology and culture. There's no doubt that technology has driven new levels of empowerment, productivity. No question about the tools that are now available for the integration of experiences, the ability for companies to, map workflows together so that anybody in an organization has the ability to provide their customers with a seamless and consistent experience. A lot of talk about EX and CX, and the ability for all employees to share that ability to seamlessly communicate with their customers. And I think that's a really important asset moving forward as you bring that productivity across the organization. Other opportunity is, the sustained mirroring of those hybrid environments. And again, I stress, I don't just mean that virtually, I also mean it physically. Mirrored means that I want the shared same experience on my desktop in an office as I do at home. I want to be able to maximize that efficiency. And as an individual, I want to be able to create my own pace by which I can take advantage of maybe productivity that has been enhanced to do other things that don't involve work, because I've managed to balance things a little bit better because of the productivity of the tools that we have. But there is a powerful, and I really cannot understress this, movement underway to redefine the power of the employee, the empowerment of culture. And certainly if I was to sum it up in 2 words about the cultural experience that we're trying to drive here at Mitel, and I think will permeate into other companies as well, is a continued empathy, a continued engagement, because it's no longer about a company defining a culture. It's about everybody within the organization listening to each other and defining what they jointly believe are the common cultures of an organization. And more we see that with customers, participating with only with companies that they share values with. Certainly not something that we may necessarily have seen in the past, but we're seeing it more and more now, the expectation from consumers that the companies that they work with will share similar values and will be outright in the expression of their opinion on what those values are. So in a kind of a summary from I know a lot of the audience here will have a strong technology bias, and would look at a company like Mitel and understand what has been the major change or transformation over the last 18 months. And I kind of sum it up, and I talk about the importance of, we immediately moved to, in March of 2020, where it was a bundled experience. It was get people working remotely and do it as quick as you possibly can, be it work from home phone, on video. In a lot of cases, it was consumer video that then became more professional video, as in video conferencing. But get people working from home as soon as you can. Bolt on anything as a service to make that as efficient as possible. And in a lot of cases, that was an afterthought. What we found more and more recently is that has become a blended experience. More and more companies are looking to Britannic and Mitel and others to say, can you help me to create what that single blended experience is? How can I make sure that my contact center as a service resembles everything, that every single employee has access through workflows to the information that a particular company or consumer is looking for at any one point in time? And we're going to see more and more of that as we move into the future, because of that importance of having a consistent experience, irrespective of the channel of communication that any one of your consumers or customers looks for. So to wrap things up, there's been so many learnings. It's been great being able to participate in this summit for the past 3 years. And make fun of yourself thinking back in 2019, you had this crystal ball because you knew all of this was going to happen, which is absolutely ridiculous because you don't. But key learnings here in November of 2021, certainly over the last year or so, from listening to all of those groups that I've described. The first is just flexibility and in agility as you're thinking through everything, not just technology, but also your employees and the work environments, whether those are virtual or becoming physical. How can you remain flexible and agile and use technology to enhance that? Because that only certainty is uncertainty. The second is collaboration in all aspects. And by that, I mean, it could be in collaboration we tend to define as the tools on our desktop, how we share. And that is incredibly important and has sustained a lot of us for the last 18 months. But a new collaboration in relation to that ability to interact again. It could be the SMBs that are collaborating again as they figure out some of the challenges around contactless. They try to figure out some of the challenges around the shipping issues. They try to figure out the challenges around shortages because of Brexit or whatever it may be. But understanding collaboration in all aspects, not just from a technology point of view, is really, really important. And then the third piece, which I think is, if I'm honest, in Mitel has become probably the most important, is that listening, and the listening to the challenges of our customers, the listening to the challenges of our employees and partners, and really defining and creating an authentic culture based on what it is that we're hearing. And more importantly, based on the needs of the individuals that depend on us as a company every single day of the week. And that's something that we don't hold lightly. It's an incredibly important piece for us. And again, we're very, very lucky that we get to work with the likes of Britannic and others. And lastly, it was really interesting. I had a real opportunity, and this will be shared, I think, today as the bells go across in the church, with Dr. Sally Eves, just talking a little bit about all of these trends and issues that we've heard. Sally's going to broadcast a podcast just on an interview that we did yesterday on a similar theme. But she really dug into some of the issues around collaboration and technology, and some of the challenges that individuals or people are facing. So Jonathan and team, as always, just a huge pleasure and a privilege to be part of this summit. We'll continue to actively engage with partners such as that yourself, and listen and continue to learn to the incredible challenges that individuals are facing right now. And yeah, look forward to being able to continue to do that with you and the team. So as always, thank you very, very much for your time today.
Thank you, David, and it's certainly reflective of a lot of changes that have happened out there in the workplace over the last couple of years. And you're right. Who would have thunk it, eh? When we stood up on stage back in 2019 that something so small as a virus could have such a fundamental impact on the way we were all going to be working and living as well into the future. And I think for me, a few of the takeaways from the presentation there is, looking at the change in where people live, the decentralization of big towns and cities, and people moving out to new areas, and looking at that as a life change. And then, of course, from there, how the importance of technology to actually keep them engaged and be part of the organization. So I think that, really important point for us all to consider. The big quit, the importance of having the right culture and investment in people, and the people having the investment in the organization. So it's a mutual position. And I think, it does raise some questions, doesn't it, around, the workplace of the future, and the retail, the sort of the footprint that business is going to have, the office footprint. We've seen it in retail, where a lot of retail businesses have moved online and closed shops and physical stores. And of course, we then saw these things changing, where a number of retail organizations were creating experience centers for customers to go to touch and feel and understand the brand. It's tough when you have got remote workforce. Part of the culture that's created with people who are present is being able to learn from each other, be able to build strong and deep relationships. How do you see that changing, and what ideas or tools could we use to try and maintain that culture of people learning from one another and not losing the power of the relationship?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think we're going to find more and more yearning for that physical interaction. It struck me again, even going back into London last week. I think over the last year and a half, we all allowed ourselves to get to a position by which we eulogized about how great it was to be able to work remotely, and we had all of these wonderful tools. It really struck me how much I missed the physical collaboration and interaction with people. And technology is amazing. I mean, we both live off technology, and we serve customers that depend on it every single day of the week. But that physical integration, conversation just spurs a different energy. There's no getting away from that. And we were incredibly fortunate. Well, be careful here. We were incredibly unfortunate that we got hit by a pandemic. We were incredibly fortunate that we had the technology that allowed us to continue to be productive. And now, as we're, beginning to think through what's next, that collaboration of how we do that, both from a technology point of view and from a physical point of view, will be key. And I know your next speaker is going to speak about the same EX and CX experience. That integration of workflows so that everybody has access to information will be really important, because consumers, certainly what we found is that consumers our customers, they expect that anybody in a company knows you. They know what you're looking for. They know what your experience needs to be. And there's only one way to do that is that, the use of workflows to automate those conversations, not the conversation, but the information and sharing. And that's going to be a really important dynamic.
Thank you. And it is interesting when you start thinking about the human side of work and well-being, and how we create a culture of sharing and conversation and supporting a learning and development culture. And will we see the emergence of areas or facilities which become these collaboration and engagement centers, as opposed to specifically come in and sit down and do a job? Does it become a learning, collaboration and engagement zone, as opposed to sit at the desk and functionally do the job?
I'm sure it will. I think the person that redefines the word office is going to make a lot of money. So there's real estate companies out there right now that must be thinking through, what do I call the office? Because it's not the office anymore. What is that experience that you're trying to create? The creativity. You mentioned the words, the experiences, or the sharing of cultures. So, the real estate companies looking at, selling office space, they have to redefine what that is, including the word. And I guarantee somebody's going to come up with it. I can't think of it right now, but somebody will, because it'll be something which has to do with the experience that you're trying to create as you bring people together again. And that's going to be really interesting to see. If only somebody in marketing could figure that out, we'd be okay, John.
Yeah, very interesting times ahead, that's for sure. And I think, again, the role of technology to help to support people when they are remote, to give them because we all know it, right? If you have problems with the tech and you struggle to get these things working, it can have a serious impact on productivity. So I think simplicity is key when it comes to supporting home workers. Make it effortless, and then where we do get to spend the time together, then be present and spend the time with people, right?
Yeah, I love that word, be present and listen, because that's empathy. I think is a word often used, but not always understood. But if you are present with somebody and you are listening to them, your opportunity to have empathy is far greater enhanced. So I think the words that you used are spot on.
Brilliant, thank you. I can't see any other questions coming in. Found it really interesting, insightful, and great to be able to have some time to have a chat at the end of it as well, right?
Yeah, likewise. And again, to stress, as always, Jonathan, appreciate the invitation. It's been really cool being able to do this 3 years in a row and look at that story. And as I think I said during the presentation, you almost feel like an oracle looking back at 2019, like you knew this was going to happen, which is BS. But it's been very rewarding, and thank you to you and your team for the invitation.
And thank you once again for playing a really key part in the day.
Okay. Good luck.
Okay. Thank you. So, David, thanks for your time. Great presentation as always, and we'll now get ready to welcome the next presenter onto the screen.